Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Poe, and today I am doing a review of The Stone Weta by Octavia Cade. This is such an amazing science fiction novella that I just fell in love with. It is so great. It is a 2020 release by a New Zealand author, and it definitely doesn't have enough people reading it. It only has currently 30 reviews on Goodreads, and it deserves so much more. It is fantastic. I heard about this book from Rachel at Culinati, who did a review of it, which I will link below, and I highly recommend you check it out because it's what convinced me to pick up this book, and I was so glad that I did. So let me tell you about what it's about and why I loved it so much. So the basic premise of this story is that it is a near future science fiction. It's very similar to the world today, except there's a few more advances in technology. There are colonies on Mars, and there are some deteriorations in terms of climate and ecology. And we follow a network of scientists who are ecologists and nature scientists that are sharing an underground secret network of data because they want to preserve the true numbers of what's going on, even though their governments are trying to hide and obfuscate a lot of those numbers. So this ends up being this really powerful story of resistance by people who care about science and nature and truth. Now let me talk about what I thought was so fantastic about this book, beginning with the fact that this is basically an ecologist espionage thriller. I think so often espionage thrillers are governments against governments, so things like the Cold War. But here we have an espionage thriller that is focused on scientists, and this book definitely has that quiet, contemplative feel that you would expect of a harder science fiction, but it also has that thrilling aspect of espionage because this is a network of women spies who are scientists who are taking data and hiding it and trying to really bypass what their governments are trying to enforce in terms of silencing what the data is saying. And the governments are not happy with these women. There's a lot that goes on and a lot of things that happen to the scientists that is very thrilling, very much like an espionage, and I was thoroughly engaged the whole read. Another aspect that really stood out to me in this book is that whole idea of ecologist espionage thriller really mirrors real life. I think that to some degree, you hear about that and you're like, oh, that's a little bit extreme, except that is what is going on in real life. If you've been following the news, you might have heard about Rebecca Jones, who is a data scientist that worked for the state of Florida. And in May of 2020, she was let go from her job because she refused to fudge the numbers on the COVID dashboard for the state. And she actually ended up, after being fired, going ahead and just setting up her own data dashboard using public data sources, but presenting it in a way that showed what was going on with COVID. And in December, the police raided her home and confiscated her phone and her laptop. And now, since January, there is a warrant for her arrest. They are trying to silence her for speaking out about what the data is saying. And so even though it sounds a little bit crazy that our government might come down so hard on scientists simply for talking about what the data is saying, we see this in real life. So this book felt very timely, very true in the way that it was talking about how scientists have to get around what their governments want them to say and the risks that they're taking in doing so. Another related aspect I loved is that this is so much an underdog story. This is the story of the little guy, of each individual scientist who is deciding that they don't want to be silenced by governments and corporations, and that they're going to resist. This is such the story of resistance, of people deciding that they're not going to be cowed by these powerful forces. And I really liked that this is underdog not just in terms of the little guy against the big guy, but it's also really focusing on women. It's a very feminist story. It's about the women scientists who are maybe not in as big of positions as some of the male scientists who are forming a network. It is also about about people who are non-American and non-European. Almost all of the characters in this book are from other countries. So Oceania and Asia and Africa and Latin America, we have characters from each of these, and we're seeing the story told out through all of their perspectives and this kind of global scale of the espionage they're doing and of the governments fighting back against them. And I just really liked that feel of everyday people who are trying to fight against the system. Another great thing about this story is that it really brings up questions of what that resistance against governments is. How is it that these scientists should resist? Should they simply hide data? Should they share data? Should they keep their heads down? Should they be more vocal? Should they recruit? Should they do things actively to stop what is going on in terms of the silencing of data? There's a lot of different questions as to what the best path forward is. And I really liked that because this story is told from multiple different perspectives of multiple different women scientists, it's taking a look at their ways of resisting and their arguments about the best way to resist, but still their core shared value that resistance is important. And lastly, I absolutely loved the nature writing in this book. So because this is a story about climate science and ecology, as well as about espionage, this book takes a really interesting tact, which is each of the members of this secret network has a code name, and their code name is an animal or an organism. And at the beginning of each chapter where we follow one of these members of the resistance, we get a little section, a little paragraph about the animal or organism that their code name represents, talking about how that animal resists, how it survives, how it deals with climate change, how it handles people attacking it. It is so fascinating. It added a really interesting layer to the story, and it just was lovely to read about all of these different parts of nature. I thought it was such a fantastic and unique way to present this information. Overall, I think that The Stone Weta is just an amazing novella. It is both quiet and thrilling. It talks about really interesting, deep, relevant scientific topics, but it also imagines this very engaging and thrilling story, this network of spies. It's so good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope that you will pick this up, and if you do, and if you're nominating for any of the SFF awards for this year, the Hugos or the BookTube SFF awards, I really think that this deserves a nomination. So I would love to hear your thoughts if you have read this, if you are interested in it, or if you've read anything else that you think is kind of like this that you'd like to recommend to me. I'd love to hear from you. Just leave me a comment down below.